In this video, I'm going to talk about James, the brother of Jesus, the psychological transformation of him after conversion. There's very little biblical text recorded about this individual. There is an element of text in John chapter 7 that refers to a adversarial encounter between Jesus and his brother. And I believe that the force of the Greek actually isn't conveyed very well in the English translation. What that means is that that particular engagement was much more emotionally intense than the English translations are able to capture. What that means is that once you look at James's absence in light of the miracles that Jesus did. He was not counted at or recorded at any of the miracles. He was not recorded to be engaged in any way in regards to his ministry. He's not counted at any of the teaching sessions that Jesus had for which was open to the public. So you would think at some point James would be there, but he is nowhere to be seen anywhere in the gospel text. We do have that one adversarial encounter, and then we have Jesus being arrested. We have Jesus being ultimately crucified, and at the crucifixion, James is also not recorded. So, in light of the adversarial engagement that they had, you have to ask yourself, what degree must you have anger or angst towards your brother that you've known your entire life, that you're not even at his death, his public crucifixion. So you have James completely rejecting everything about Jesus. There is absolutely no recording of James being involved in Jesus' ministry at any point in time other than in a negative situation. However, after the resurrection, after Pentecost, you have James throughout the book of Acts all of a sudden connected to and on fire for the Christian church. He rose through the ranks of the Christian church and ultimately became the leader of the church in Jerusalem. Now you must ask yourself, what was it that created this psychological baseline shift before the resurrection and the change after the resurrection? You see a behavioral pattern by negation in the beginnings of Jesus's ministry all the way up to the actual crucifixion. There is absolutely no recordings of his brother James. You would think, in light of the enormity of the miracles that and the geographical distance there, that those elements would have at some point been transmitted to James, but it was not enough to motivate James to believe that Jesus was, in fact, the Messiah, the Christ, the Son of God. However, after the so called resurrection, you see a transformation in the life of James that is so great that he ultimately was drugged in front of the Sanhedrin and charged with a crime for saying that he knew that his brother had died, but that he seen his brother alive, and was stoned to death to by making that declaration. So what you see there is a transformation of enormous proportions in the life of the brother of Jesus, James. And it is only after the resurrection and the filling of the Holy Spirit that you see this baseline maintained throughout. So you must ask yourself, how is it that James can, in before the resurrection, completely neglect Jesus, then only after the resurrection not only become the leader of the church in Jerusalem, but go to his death declaring that he saw his brother raised? what would motivate him to neglect all of the miracles that Jesus did, but then after the resurrection, go to his death for Jesus? You have to ask yourself this question. You have to determine what changed this individual. What would it take to completely neglect your brother? How mad would you have to be at your brother to not even be at his public crucifixion, but then in a very short time after that, based on the biblical text and in light of behavioral psychology today, you would expect to see a transformation of enormous proportions if a man knew that an individual was dead and then he raised up and revealed himself to his very eyes. You would expect to see an enormous psychological transformation. And in light of 2020 psychological academia, that's exactly what you see. You see a consistent baseline change. You see an enormous change in his disposition towards Jesus, the teachings of Jesus, the Christian church, and ultimately this man went to his death for Jesus. This is the same man that refused to go to his miracle, the same man that refused to follow him throughout his ministry, the same man that refused to even be counted among the disciples, refused to go to a public execution, but ultimately went to his death for an individual that he had absolutely no belief in prior to. So, in light of that, this is just another element of new psychological apologetics and apologetic argument that I have created. It is a further process of Josh McDowell's new evidence that demands a verdict. I believe that the behavioral characteristic transformation substantiates not only the historical accuracy of the Gospels, but the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and again substantiates the power of the Holy Spirit that fell on Pentecost to motivate James to not only join the Christian church, but to actualize the gifts that were given through the Holy Spirit that were not evident anywhere in the text prior to Pentecost, to actualize those gifts to begin to preach and teach within the Church of Jerusalem and ultimately stand in front of the Sanhedrin of the religious leaders of that day and say, I will not stop preaching Jesus. It is that change, that behavior pattern shift, the power of the Holy Spirit that sent a man directly to his death after he was filled with the Holy Spirit, but would not even motivate that individual to be present at his brother's death. So think about that. Thank you for watching the video. Subscribe if you would like to. My email address is on my channel. Contact me if you have any questions, concerns. Thank you very much.